Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to Overwatch. So, if you haven't noticed, there was quite a big patch moved to the live servers a couple of days ago. Now, this was a patch that was actually on the experimental card and had been for about a week. Now, it was just a simple buff nerf patch. So they've moved it straight to live. It's now available in competitive and in quick play and arcade and wherever else you tend to play your Overwatch. But it's got some very significant changes. It's one of the biggest balance patches we've had since the big double barrier nerf thing that didn't work in the end. But yeah, we're going to take a look at this. It's got some nerfs to Brig, it's got some nerfs to Orisa, it's got some nerfs to Sigma, it's got changes to Pharah and things like that. So we're going to take a look at all these heroes individually and kind of do some assumptions on what we might see in the future. So Brigitte is who we're going to start off with. Now, the comments on this from the developers are, after gaining multiple repair pack charges, Brigitte was enabled to play at safer distances while still having a powerful impact on her team. Combined with her personal barrier, she ended up not needing as much survivability in terms of raw health. Inspire has also had a powerful impact despite being hard to feel due to its passive nature. So we are lowering its team-wide healing output. Jeez, these developer comments. While making it more useful for Brig to heal herself. So her base health has been lowered from 200 to 150. Now this means that she obviously has 50 less hit points. She has 50 armor base, so you'll be 150 health, 50 armor, 200 HP all together instead of the 250. This makes her a little bit less tanky. She has to be a little bit more conservative. She can't be the big brawler that she was. But again, this is offset by something we're going to talk about in a minute, because there are two changes to Inspire, which is her passive healing, as they were pointing out in the comments. So, the total healing has been decreased from 130 to 90. Healing reduced from 21 to 15 health per second. So, by all means, this just means she outputs less healing. That's just what Brig does. She's very good at getting in the fight, doing damage, and then that Inspire activates, and she does healing. So she does less healing when she's doing that, which means brawl comps, she's less able to keep them alive, and she's less able to kind of sustain the fight like Brigitte could before. But also, the self-healing is no longer reduced by half. So Brigitte had a thing where, yes, this healing is done to her teammates, but for herself, it was cut in half. But that's no longer a thing. So she will get the same healing output as her teammates do when Inspire is active. Now, what does this mean exactly? So there's no changes to her pack healing, which is fine. She can heal at long distances with that, but it's not a massive amount in some respects compared to other heroes that we have that can heal at those distances. But when it comes to her in the brawl fight, she's more squishy because she has less HP. She's also not sustaining her team as much through the less Inspire healing that she can output. But she is probably going to still probably maintain the sustain that she had because she now has more self-healing to offset the base health being lowered, if you see what I mean there. So she's got less base health, but she's got more healing to keep herself in the fight. So that's kind of the give and take here. Yes, they've taken some base health away, but they've given her more healing to herself, so she can sustain for longer. Otherwise, she really would be struggling to keep in brawl fights. The big thing here to me is the total healing from Inspire being less, which means you're going to have to sustain more when you're in that comp. But there are other heroes that could probably pick up the slack. I'm thinking of someone like Moira. So I don't think this is a massive nerf to Brigitte, and I think a few other people will tell you that as well. I think Brigitte is still pretty strong. She still has a really good kit to protect her back line. It's still going to be a tussle between her and Lucio in that main support slot, and I still think Brigitte is going to come out on top pretty much. But again, it depends a bit on what we see in terms of tanks as well. which is where the real spice starts with these patch notes, because we're now going to move on to Orisa. So this is massive, in my opinion. This is pretty darn massive for Orisa. So her base armor has been reduced from 250 to 200. So this means that, yes, she's just got less armor. She's now got 400 hit points instead of 450, I believe. So yes, she's just going to die quicker. But that is not the big thing here. The big thing is the changes to Halt, and the developer comments mention this. So the large radius of Orisa's Halt ability made it too effective in setting up combos against large groups of enemies on a relatively short cooldown. The changes to the projectile speed and radius are aimed at shifting its use to be more effective at catching single targets. So, what does this mean? Well, Halt has had its radius reduced from 7 to 4 meters, but its projectile speed has been increased from 20 to 30. So, this is pretty major, because a lot of the time we saw the Halt used to set up massive wombo combos. So during the Summer Showdown in the Overwatch League, and I'm not going to talk too much about Overwatch League here because I want to concentrate more on comp really, but in the Overwatch League we saw a big meta during the Summer Showdown, which was Orisa, Sigma, and Genji, right? Where Orisa could set up a Halt, a Sigma could throw his rock into that Halt, and normally the Halt would get 3 or 4 people, especially at that level because they're so grouped up. The rock will get someone from the Halt, and then the Genji or the DPS could pump some damage into it. But back then, this was all reliant on the fact that Orisa could halt people above shields. Or barriers. I should use the proper terminology. Barriers, shouldn't I? But with this nerf to the radius of Halt, it becomes much more difficult to do that. And Halt is the piece of kit that keeps Orisa meta in a lot of respects. It has so many uses. It's a little mini Graviton Surge in some respects, isn't it? And you can throw a dragon into it. You can get a Genji ult and use that through it. You can use all sorts through it, and it's become really powerful. This radius nerf is pretty darn massive in my opinion. Again, we'll have to see how it plays out. But with it now becoming quite difficult to halt people above shields, especially a static Orisa shield, because normally if you halted a Reinhardt or people behind a Reinhardt in that above their shield, the Reinhardt will move with it and the shield will move with it, quite obviously. But if you were halting out of Orisa shields, it was pretty powerful and a lot could get done. It makes this a lot more difficult, this nerf to the radius. Also, it makes it a lot more difficult to achieve environmental kills with Orisa's halt. So it becomes much more a single target use sort of thing instead of putting an entire team together, as the devs say. So that's kind of coupled with the projectile speed, so you can actually launch it at a target for it to get there quite a lot quicker than it had done previously. So this is a very interesting change to Orisa, and probably the most influential change out of all of these buffs or nerfs. It will take some time for this to settle in. I fully am sort of thinking that normally with these sorts of major changes, we see the meta kind of blow up in competitive for a little while, week, maybe 2 weeks, and then things start to settle down into a, nailed on sort of meta. Now, we may speculate on what that might be in a minute, but this is pretty major for Orisa. Halt was a massive thing to the whole kit of Orisa, and we will see where this goes. But we're not just ending there, because there are plenty more to look at. So, we are now going to look at Pharah. So, Pharah has had some changes. Her hover jet's movement speed has been increased 20%, so she can move quicker in the air. But the regeneration rate of her hover jet has been reduced from 50 to 35 per second. Her barrage has also had a reduction in duration from 3 to 2.5. So the developer comments on this is, we're making some adjustments to hover jets that should increase her flight speed and make her more agile. To compensate for this change, we're lowering her hover uptime. Rocket Barrage has such immense damage output that the tail end of the duration was often more of a liability than a benefit, especially with fewer barriers around to blast through. So, this is a response to, well, the devs are claiming that the barrage change is a response to the barrier changes, and this hoverjet changes to make her much more of an assassin instead of a spam damage sort of hero, much more of a divey, perhaps, Pharah. I don't like these changes. I don't, especially the regeneration rate nerf. Pharah is not powerful at the moment, in my opinion. She is powerful in the right hands, don't get me wrong, but I don't think she's powerful. We've got Echo now, and I think Echo is a much more powerful option compared to Pharah. Pharah is a very, very specialist sort of hero right now, I would say. When you look at teams, they will probably pick an Echo over a Pharah a lot. She's a lot more powerful than Pharah is. So, I think, and I know this is a bold move, but I think they should have tried these hoverjet changes with just a movement speed increase, and not the regeneration rate reduction. Because what that means now is that she cannot infinite fly. Now, previously, if you managed your jet fuel properly, you could fly forever as Pharah, and normally you'd have a Mercy alongside you. That is not possible with this regeneration rate reduction. And so, Pharah becomes this very weird hero where she just kind of goes up and either eventually floats down, or she uses these boosts to get in but ends up as a ground hero. It's really, really weird, and it really feels quite off because, again, there's this hero called Echo, and this just seems to lean more towards Echo being more powerful than Pharah, in my opinion. I think it's a really odd change. Yeah. In a situation where I think Pharah needed to be competitive with Echo, I think they've made her less competitive with Echo. And that seems very, 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 very weird. Very weird. And in terms of saying the Rocket Barrage has such immense damage output that the tail end of the duration was more of a liability than a benefit, especially with fewer barriers around to blast through. So they're saying it was too long, so she was at risk for too long. So, really? Really? There were less barriers around. Really? Really? Pharah wasn't being used. Pharah wasn't being used. I think the barrage duration and the regeneration rate reduction of her hoverjets were not needed. Those changes were not needed. Just make the movement speed increase on their experimental, see what happens, go with the flow, and then make further changes a little bit down the line if Pharah becomes a little bit weird. That's what I would have done. But yeah, I think these are some weird changes to Pharah, I'm not going to lie, and Pharah mains are probably a little bit weirded out by it. But we're going to move back to the tanks now. Roadhog has had some changes. So, the scrap gun is all of where his changes are centered on. General changes are that his ammo has been reduced from 6 to 5. I think he originally had 5, if I remember rightly. His damage per projectile has increased from 6 to 7, so he's got less shots, but more damage in his shot. And the recovery has been increased from 0.7 to 0.85, so he shoots a little bit slower. So, these weapon changes are intended to make Roadhog's chain hook combo more consistent and bring back some of the heavyweight feeling it had in the past. So what they're saying is they want to make his gun more punchy. Now, I've tested some of this stuff, and I think, especially the Pharah and the tank changes, and I think this Roadhog is one that's going to take a while to work out. I've seen a lot of people picking up the Roadhog and testing it, but that could be just due to the weirdness of the meta right now, because things tend to blow up with a big patch like this, on competitive at least for a week or so. As I said earlier, I don't know whether this Roadhog is enormously strong. He does do a little bit more damage. If you've got the accuracy with Hog, then he will do more damage now. But it's a weird one. It's a weird one. It feels a little bit janky at times. I've had good matches and bad matches on this version of Roadhog. To be honest, I don't think he's going to be meta. I don't think Hog's going to be meta until Hog gets some sort of rework, because he's not a tank. He's just a very big hitbox DPS, really. Really, at the end of the day, he does nothing for the protection of his team, which pretty much every other tank does, apart from Hammond. But Hammond is very good at disruption, so he can kind of think of that. But yeah, these Roadhog changes are a little bit weird, and it'll take a while to work them out. But here are some more really major changes. This is to Sigma, so obviously this is the double barrier nerf patch that we've got for like the second iteration because the first one didn't work. Kind of a Pepe hands on the dev side of things, but what have they done to Sigma then? So the experimental barrier has had its health reduced from 900 to 700. Remember that barrier started off as a 1200 HP barrier, I think? So yeah, it's almost halved now. Regeneration rate has also been reduced from 120 to 60 per second. So that is just big nerfs to the experimental barrier. Kinetic Grasp has also had its cooldown increased from 10 to 12 seconds. So, this is all nerf. This is all nerfs to Sigma. There are no buffs here. There's nothing to offset these nerfs coming in. These are just straight up nerfs. So, the dev's comments are, given Sigma's offensive strength with hyperspheres and accretion, we have reduced some of his defensive tools to bring him more in line with other tank heroes. Which makes sense. When you look at a lot of the off tanks, when you look at D.Va, especially these days with D.Va, with her micro missiles and stuff like that, she can be very, very offensive, very, very assassiny when she gained those micro missiles instead of being more of a peel tank. When we look at Roadhog, incredibly offensive, high damage output. Zarya, incredibly offensive, high damage output with a little bit of defensive right there. Sigma, he was incredibly defensive and offensive. So now the devs are trying to lean into Sigma being more of an offensive off tank and less of the defensive. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out. Obviously, this means his barrier is going to be up less because the regeneration rate has been reduced, so it doesn't regen as quickly. And plus, there's just straight up less health for that barrier, so it's not going to be up as much. Also, he has less sustain because he can't keep on using Kinetic Grasp as much because of the cooldown increase for Kinetic Grasp. So this is going to be interesting. I don't think it's going to make a massive difference to Sigma. I think the changes to Orisa are much, much bigger than these changes to Sigma. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out and whether it opens up enough of a window to bring in another comp like Dive. We've been seeing Winston Zarya, we might see Winston D.Va, or we might see Sigma used in another way, which we'll go through that in a minute. Going through some of the other changes though, Symmetra has had a change. This is to her teleporter, which is its cooldown has been reduced from 12 to 10 seconds, just so she can use it more. I mean, okay, dude, okay. And Zenyatta has had his Orb of Destruction changed once again. They're always fiddling with Zen's orbs, aren't they? Charge rate has been increased 15%, 0.6 down to 0.52 seconds per orb. And the rate of fire increased from 8.5 to 9 shots per second. So this is his secondary fire. So he can shoot out the volleys more quickly. It's going to be interesting. They say that Zenyatta has low healing and mobility outside of his ultimate, but makes up for it with high potential damage output. With the recently lowered barrier uptime resulting in an overall faster pace of the game, we want to make sure Zenyatta still excels at his strengths. This change will make his charged attack flow a bit better in combat. Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether he needed that, to be quite honest. I mean, we've been seeing a bit more Zen Bap recently, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But the big things in this patch are the Sigma nerfs, the Orisa nerfs, and the Brigitte nerfs. Obviously targeted very heavily at the meta. So overall, what do we think about this? And I know this has been a long video, so I'm going to round it out with this. Overall, what do we think about this? Well, the Orisa nerfs are pretty big in my opinion, because it really targets Halt, which is a massive ability in Orisa's kit. Less than her barrier and stuff like that. The Halt was a massive ability. And I think this is a real punisher for Orisa. So I think this is where we could possibly see finally the downfall of Orisa. The question is, do we see the downfall of double barrier? I don't know. Because I don't think the Sigma changes are massive enough. And there are other comps that we have seen using double barrier, namely the Reinhardt and the Sigma. So it is possible that a small transition is made to go over to Reinhardt Sigma. If that's the case, then we are still in the same position. In fact, actually, you're in a worse position because there's a lot more HP shields on the, or HP barriers on the field compared to Orisa Sigma because of the HP pools being being bigger. So that could be an issue. And if they do go down that route, I hope the devs concentrate on nerfing Sigma and not Reinhardt, because if they start nerfing Reinhardt too heavily, he will become ultimate trash tier. But I don't know whether that is the most likely option, because we have seen, especially at the highest level, a lot of people moving away from double barrier anyway, and taking on the Winston Zarya as a new form of dive. Now this is a comp we could see excel in this situation, and it would be where I would place my bet for a meta to exist, especially now we don't have hero pools in competitive. This is where I think things could go down, where you play the main tank Winston with the Zarya to bubble him as he's going in. You can also substitute at times the Winston out for a Hammond, but that is where I see the meta for the tanks right now. It will take some time, especially on competitive, for this to work out. That's what I would say. It's going to take a good week or two for this to really iron itself out on competitive, especially at the highest level. So the question is, probably revisit this in a couple of weeks and see where things are at. See whether Orisa has completely gone trash tier, whether Reinhardt Sigma is a thing, whether it's Winston Zarya. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. I don't think this affects D.Va too much. I think D.Va will still be... I want to say D.Va's more of a specialist pick right now. She's not the meta hero that she has been for, or was for a very, very long time pre-double barrier, where she was literally in pretty much every comp since launch. Defense Matrix was pretty powerful back then. I don't think this affects D.Va too much, and the Hog changes, I just don't think Hog is going to be propelled into the meta, but in the right hands, Hog can always be strong, especially in lower levels, where he gets a lot of value, and doesn't tend to get punished as harshly by some people. The Pharah changes are odd, in my opinion, and I would like to see some changes to them, and we will see how the rest of it turns out. It's going to be an interesting one, and this will be the patch that the Overwatch League playoffs will be played on. So it's going to be a lot at stake. There's going to be a lot at stake, but for comp, make sure you're playing what you're good at. Make sure you're playing what you're good at. Please don't flex into roles that you don't understand or don't know. Especially if you're a Roadhog main and you go onto the Reinhardt, it's a very, very different type of hero. And sometimes it can be more detrimental for you not to play your best heroes. But also, we don't, in competitive, technically like to see D.Va, Roadhog comps and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it for now. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then. See you then.